teeth and dry mouth relief.
You feel the media one day maybe was favorable or emphasizing on behalf of Mrs. Zimmerman, and on the other way, other days maybe on behalf of Trayvon Martin?
No, I thought they were just trying to sell news.
Did you watch some of the proceedings on TV?
No, sir.
You don't watch very much TV, it sounds like.
No.
And don't know much about this case. Is that correct?
Just as eyes.
Is there any other aspect of the case that you believe the media is being unfair to Mrs. Zimmerman recently?
Not recently. It seems to be fairly neutral recently.
Well, you can't turn on a national news program without catching an update on the George Zimmerman trial, that's for sure. And the people living in Seminole County, Florida, where the attorneys are trying to pick a jury, you got to only assume that they've seen something as well. You know, Jason, are people living, I guess the people living in Sanford, are they just getting bombarded by local coverage of this case?
They really aren't, and yet they're still sort of paranoid about it. It's been a very interesting experience just being down here and talking to people. Most people here are informed, but it's not on the local news every single day. But I will tell you this. Anytime you bring up a conversation about the Zimmerman trial, people ask you, are you a member of the press? Are you part of the press? Because they're concerned. And I contrast that to Cleveland, where everyone wants to talk about Ariel Castro. That's where I just came from. But people down here, they don't want to talk.
Gene, does that surprise you? And, you know, you would kind of think as a local news station, they'd be all, I mean, this is like a national news story.
Right. Well, I watch the news when I'm not here, and I'm seeing a lot on local news. I see it as almost the lead story every day. So, but here's what's interesting. When you go juror by juror, if there's one thing across the board of the jurors being individually questioned, they know about the protests and the rallies, and they have opinions on that. And the attorneys constantly have to say, can you set that aside? Now, an African-American juror is the last one that was questioned, and let me tell you what he said. I didn't think having the national black leaders in the community at that time, I didn't think it was appropriate. I didn't think it was necessary. And that really is the state of mind of a lot of jurors, no matter what their race.
So, Stephan, when you talk about the potential of tainting a jury, just listening to Jason's, who is there, Gene is there, and they have different opinions, right, for what's on the news and not on the news and what people are saying.
Yeah, I mean, trying to find a jury here is nearly impossible. When you're looking, you're sifting through all of these people, and all of them have some sort of knowledge of it. And the ones that don't are who you're putting on the jury. And the fact that there's a bunch of people where the biggest trial in the nation is happening in your backyard and you know nothing about it, that's not a great juror. Those people are not going to pay attention. They're not going to know what's going on. If they haven't figured out that Trayvon and Zimmerman, what happened in their own backyard, they're not going to be able to pay attention during a trial. I don't like any of these people as jurors. It's rough for a fair trial for either side.
What if a verdict comes down, Jason? Have you found that people are concerned about what could happen after that?
Well, they're concerned, but what's interesting is, you know, the Justice Department has had civil rights mediators down here from the very beginning. That's one of the reasons that there's almost no protests. If you look outside today, there's nobody there. And so I think while there's a concern that this could turn into some sort of huge rioting situation, nothing really on the ground suggests that that's going to happen, even if George Zimmerman is found not guilty.
What do you think of that, Gene? Because I was reading there were a bunch of pastors that came together and said, look, we got to show up, we got to talk to people, we got to make sure we can try and keep the peace here. Are you seeing a big effort to try to keep things calm?
I see a lot of security, more security than I normally see at a trial. They are positioned outside the courthouse. They are positioned at the entrance, at the exit, inside the courtroom, outside the courtroom. There's 2 security lines that you have to go through to finally get into the courtroom. Saying that, you're right, I don't see any protesters, demonstrators. This is jury selection. This is the lull, you could say, before the storm in one way, because it's always a little low-key, because it's monotonous day after day. But there are 4 seats specifically for ministers in that courtroom. And I've never heard of this either. There was at least one there yesterday. They have been there every day. They sit behind the Trayvon Martin family, and they are there just to bring a peace and a solitude to the courtroom, to the atmosphere, to the community.
Interesting. Well, we'll follow that angle for sure. We could have a jury this week in the George Zimmerman murder trial. All day, we have been watching the lawyers question potential jurors. They're coming back from lunch right now. We're following it. And the parents of Trayvon Martin still coping with the loss of their son. Vinnie Politan actually sits down with Tracy Martin to talk about losing Trayvon, what he thinks happened that night, and, of course, the impending trial.
Is it difficult to be in the room with George Zimmerman?
Very, yeah, very.
it's difficult sitting there and seeing the killer of our child sit there with this fixed stare as if he did nothing.
It's a sneak peek into a 2-night special on HLN After Dark starting tomorrow 10 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, this man allegedly had a collection of